mortgage was lost. For want of a mortgage, a family was lost. For want of a family, a future was lost. And for want of a future, a nation was lost. It doesn't happen overnight. It happens quietly. One opportunity denied, one rung of the ladder kicked away, one dream postponed, multiplied by the millions. Soon the whole machinery of society begins to grind to a halt. And if we're not paying attention, we may not realize the danger until the damage is irreversible. Let's welcome James with his speech entitled, "The Kids Aren't All Right, the Coming National Crisis."
I'll preface this speech by saying it will be a very controversial speech, and the fact that it's going to be controversial is part of the reason why it's such an intractable problem that must be addressed, but likely will not be. Our great collapse won't be a single moment in time. It won't be a natural disaster that takes us down. The signs are present, and the warnings are clear. We just lack the will to address the situation. It won't be the sound of cannons or crumbling walls that dictate our decline. It will be a quiet decline, disguised by statistics and headlines that we scroll past on our cell phones. Millions will quietly give up, not out of choice, but because they feel that they have no place in our future. When enough people give up, tomorrow no longer belongs to all of us. And this isn't about pity. This is about a growing danger, a fracture in our society. And if we ignore it, the consequences won't be dire just for the group that's impacted the most, young white males, but all of us. For there is a generation of young white men. They're military age, they're capable, they're intelligent. But they've been alienated from our society. They've been ostracized, vilified, and made to feel worthless and unwanted. They're shut out of pathways towards building a stable and productive life. And this alienation isn't just another statistic. It's a growing social fault line that absolutely must be addressed. These are a few of the core challenges that face this group. This by no means is an exhaustive list. The main challenge that faces them is economic displacement, job market disadvantage. Currently, we're all aware of artificial intelligence. Well, there is currently a lawsuit against one such company that provides applications for going through and verifying the information on applications submitted for job employment. This lawsuit is based on the idea that there is age discrimination that's been programmed into this algorithm. We have to ask ourselves, if they can program these algorithms to knock people out based on being too old, what other aspects are they also judging people on before they can even get their application seen by a hiring manager? There's also large hedge funds, such as BlackRock, State Street, Vanguard. These companies impose DEI requirements on every company that they invest in. Together, they own more than a fifth of the US economy. More on them later. There's also the H-1B situation. Currently, there's about 5 million tech jobs in the United States. There are about 3.5 million H-1B visa workers. 70% of them work in the tech industry. You can do the math and figure out why there's so many native-born United States citizens that are unable to get jobs in the tech industry. And as a result of being shut out from the job market, they're shut out also from wealth creation. Home ownership is delayed. One statistic I came across recently said that in the 50s, over half of the population of men 30 years old were already married and had a home. Today, 70 years later, that statistic is less than 15%. Less than 15% of men 30 years of age are married or own a home. Going back to State Street, BlackRock, these other hedge funds, they're buying up a lot of properties currently. And that's part of the reason that's causing this sort of issue. These young men have been told by the coastal elites, learn to code. And yet those jobs are being taken away from them. There's also the societal atomization. There's a loss of those social networks that used to provide for these young men. Church groups, fraternal orders, sports clubs, they would be able to build networks through these organizations that would have been able to sustain them in times past. But these organizations are all but gone at this point. Small town industries have dried up, or worse, these industries have been replaced by immigrant workers. And as a result, these young men have been forced to move to larger and larger cities, where they're cut off from their hometowns, cut off from their families, left isolated and alone. There's also the social hostility towards masculinity in general, but white men in particular. Masculinity is treated as a defect by our society, and white men are viewed as automatically evil oppressors. Diversity preferences for jobs or for college entry place white men, young white men, at a distinct artificial disadvantage. Some of the dangerous consequences of this issue are, on the small scale, addiction and self-destructive behavior. Young white men are often turning to drugs, alcohol, pornography, gaming addictions, just to mask these symptoms. All they want to do is belong. All they want is purpose, but they're not getting it. So they turn to these destructive behaviors. As a result, there's also the societal breakdown. Because with less families, you have fewer children. And with fewer children, you have demographic decline. And this creates a vicious cycle where the more immigrants you bring in, the more immigrants you will need to bring in to take care of the needs of that immigrant group, until eventually you just have to keep bringing in more and more immigrants to take care of the society. Ultimately, civil unrest and violence is inevitable. See, when millions are cut off, they feel like they have nothing left to lose, they will act out. This misguided policy of forced diversity, is it worth the cost of marching boots in the streets, or the sounds of war in our outskirts? But there are some solutions to this issue. We must remove artificially imposed barriers to education and employment. We need to give young white men opportunities to build communities and build purposes in their lives. We absolutely have to end the zero-sum policies of forced diversity. It shouldn't be a zero-sum game. Ideally, it should be merit-based, colorblind. It should be based on who is the best for the position, not meeting certain artificial requirements. Millions of young white men are being currently ostracized. Everyone knows somebody like this in their lives, in their families. The flippantly dismissive attitude towards the sizable segment of our population reminds me of a social media post I came across years ago. It reads, "It sure is tragic that young men are losing their station in society. Boo-hoo, poor men, LOL. No, you don't understand. There's an entire generation of fighting-age men who are enraged and feel they have nothing to live for. You are in danger." Look into those eyes. Those are the eyes of a generation backed into a corner. And we won't like the outcome if this group decides they have nothing left to live for, if they decide that there's nothing left to do but to act out, to make their case known to society at large. As I said at the start, this is going to be a controversial speech. It shouldn't have to be this way. We should be able to speak on these issues without any sort of social backlash. This isn't about putting white men up here and everybody else down here. It's about understanding that we are all equal, about understanding that we all have a place in our society, and that one group shouldn't be made out to be the villains, to be vilified, to be ostracized, to be pushed aside by the rest of society. especially since many of these young men weren't alive during these social evils that they're being blamed for. Many of these young men, under the age of 30, that puts them at born in the 90s. What happened in the 90s that was so dire and so destructive? These aren't people that were slave owners. These aren't people that were Jim Crow followers. These are people that were born into a society that decided that they had no value, that they had no purpose, that nobody wanted them around. And again, I ask you, is it worth the coming civil unrest, the civil violence that we may experience, that we most likely will experience, if we do not address this issue? I hope that each one of us take away from this speech the ideal that we must all do something to stand up for the ostracized among us. And that goes for everybody. It's not just about white or black or Hispanic or anything like that. If you are ostracized from society, you are automatically at a disadvantage and you're not going to be able to promote your life. You're not going to be able to move forward in life. Everybody deserves an opportunity to be able to move forward. And if we have a society, if we have a nation, if we have a government that does not promote these ideals, then we have to seriously reevaluate the society that we live in. Thank you.